There's this great part in J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings. If you haven't watched the movies or read the books, shame on you. Just kidding. But awesome stories. So if you have seen it, you'll track with it. If not, I'm sorry. There's this great scene to where this guy named Gandalf, who's this wizard, and he's the leader of this company that's out on this epic mission to go destroy evil forever. Gandalf is leading them, and then they come to this one spot against this huge enemy. Everyone crosses this bridge, and then Gandalf goes out and he stands in the middle of this bridge, and it's a chasm beneath him. He stands there and won't let the evil cross, and they've still got a long way to go to destroy evil forever. Gandalf stands there and says, "You shall not pass," right? You know what I'm talking about if you've seen it. It's epic. He says, "You shall not pass," and he says all this epic stuff that I'm not going to try to recreate. And then the bridge falls down, the evil guy falls down in the pit, and then he whips up his tail or a whip and catches Gandalf's foot, pulls him off. Gandalf's hanging there, and all of his company are looking at him like, "Our leader." And then he just says, "Fly, you fools," and he falls. And if you've seen it, you know, like the terror and the horror. It's like our fearless, powerful leader just fell into utter darkness, just fell into the pit. He's gone. He's abandoned. He's dead. If you watch the rest of the story, he actually comes back from death to life. He comes back and he's more wise, he's more powerful, he's stronger, and he actually ends up leading the company to be able to destroy evil forever. But at the time when he falls into that chasm, you go, all right, Gandalf's gone. We're hopeless. But through the sovereign working plan of this story, he comes back and they defeat evil forever. You know, the same thing happened to Joseph. Joseph was put in a pit of darkness. Joseph left his father's home. He went to a distant land called Dothan. Do you ever wonder why? Like, you look in the story and there's so many details. And a lot of times we look at the details of stories and we're like, golly, I guess they just wanted us to know every single thing that's going on. But we're told he went to this place called Shechem. They weren't there. And then he ended up going to this place called Dothan. So he goes to Dothan, and his brothers received him not. He was stripped of his robe. That was the symbol of his father's love for him. His father gave him this gift. This is how, a very physical reminder that Joseph's dad loved him. He was stripped of that. He was cast into a pit and abandoned to death. And you know he's crying out from the pit. That word in verse 24 that says he was cast into a pit, that word is the word that's used throughout the Old Testament, talking about casting a dead body into a grave. It's a serious word. They're throwing Joseph's body into a pit as though they would throw a dead body into a grave. He was abandoned to death. He was betrayed by his own. He was sold into slavery for pieces of silver. Can you imagine what's going on in his head? I imagine he wishes he wasn't such a tool and arrogant. But his own brothers, his own flesh and blood, throw him in a pit, abandon him, and then they figure out we can just get rid of him without having his blood on our hands. We'll just sell him. We'll make him a slave the rest of his life. Sold him into slavery. He was falsely accused for sins that he never committed. He gets sold into slavery. He ends up going to this guy named Potiphar, and he becomes kind of the second in charge for this guy named Potiphar. He's one of his servants. Potiphar's wife likes the way Joseph looks, tries to come on to him. Joseph says no. Says, I'm not going to sleep with you. Happens another time. He says no. She grabs him, and it says that he runs away naked. I guess he had a robe on, and she grabbed it, wouldn't let him go, and he flees. He ran. Flee from sexual immorality. That dude did. He ran away naked. So he runs away, and then Potiphar's wife comes to Potiphar and says, Jacob tried to rape me. So Potiphar throws him in prison. And all this stuff, Jacob's life seemed great. He has his father's love, everything. Then he's thrown into a pit. He's sold into slavery. His own people, his own brothers rejected him. And then he's falsely accused and falsely has to pay the punishment for crimes and sins he never committed. But here's the thing about this story. If Jacob didn't go through every single one of those things, he and his entire family would have died. I'm not making that up. A famine was actually coming on this land. And it was going to be a famine of 7 years, that nothing was going to grow for 7 years. So during this time, it's when Joseph's going into slavery, he gets thrown in prison, and then he starts interpreting some dreams. God gives him a gift to interpret dreams of these prison guards, and these guys are like, oh my gosh. And so then they tell the Pharaoh. This is the king of Egypt, that this guy can interpret dreams. So then Joseph goes to Pharaoh and interprets some of his dreams. Long story short, the king of Egypt, the Pharaoh, makes Joseph the prime minister of Egypt. Joseph was the second in command in Egypt. God gave him a dream that said there's going to be a 7-year famine. But before that famine, there's going to be 7 years of plenty. And so Joseph said, okay, he tells the Pharaoh, in this 7 years of plenty, we're going to save up all of this grain because I know a 7-year famine's coming, and we're going to save enough grain to last those 7 years. So the Pharaoh says, do it. So he does it. And then basically all over this part of the world, everyone's starving. Everyone's dying because they didn't know a 7-year famine was coming. They're living it up during the 7 years of plenty. Famine comes. What do we do? And people started going to Egypt because they had heard that they had saved up enough food to last these years. So what happens is Joseph's brothers who sold him into slavery, they end up having to come to Egypt, not knowing what's happened to Joseph. Joseph's the prime minister. They end up coming before him, and they don't know it's him. And he has the choice whether or not to give them food or not. What does he do? He gives them food. He reveals himself to them that I'm your brother. I'm the one you sold into slavery. But what I want you to see is God was silent in this situation. Like you read this and God's not saying anything. It seems like God's absent, God's silent, but you've got to know that even if God seems silent in a situation, he is never absent from it.